Oh, my mic is muted. Can you hear me? I can't sure. Okay. Greetings, everyone. I am Dr. Noni Davis, and I am here to do a presentation on pres- um a science presentation I did for the Council of Independent Black Institutions regarding forces, regarding simple machines, and how we need to decolonize, continue to decolonize our worldview of science and what that means through the African lens. One of the first statements that I found was one based on the African framework for curriculum, which was introduced by to me by Dr. Greg Carr, and I think it's a collective um, uh, approach for social studies, science, math, and literature. And the purpose of it is to help us navigate each area of the curriculum, and by looking at these events through the history, through science, through technology, and understanding of how Africans were relating to their environment, and so every unit that I present in my at the school at St. C Academy, which was started in 1996 by my mom and dad, my parents, uh, the late William Edward Davis Sr., and my mother, who is still with us, Sylvia Davis. Um, we wanted to create an environment where our children can learn through the African worldview. And so, with that in mind, the unit that I presented again was forces. And so, most of us are familiar with these forces. All of us have heard about the simple machines. We know about levers, we know about wheels, we know about screws, we are familiar with uh, wheels and axles. We know about wedges and inclined planes. And so basically, uh, I use those ideas, that knowledge that we already have, and found these examples in African traditional ways of knowing in science. And the what we also know, or what I've also introduced, is that African people were on the planet for a, a long time before anybody else was here. So we were um, here at 300,000 years ago. And then I think about 80,000 years ago, people started to leave the continent and spread to other lands. But everybody on the planet was African. And because that is our ancestral home, I start there. Alkebulan, Africa, however you want to call it. That is where our ancestors are birth were birthed, and where they developed, and they had to figure out how to integrate with their environment. What did they have to integrate with? Uh, Forces. What did they have to know about nature? What did they observe while they were on this planet? And so there were so many things that they had to invent, mostly for survival, mostly for integrating with this community. And they also had this a spiritual aspect, and we see it demonstrated in the Kemetic worldview philosophy. We see it demonstrated in Ifa, which is a Yoruba tradition, spiritual tradition. We see it throughout the continent. There's this through line of ma'at, of harmony, of balance, of justice, of order, of truth and righteousness, reciprocity and prosperity. That was our mindset. So we were not trying to uh, control the earth, but live in a harmonious relationship with the earth. And how do we engage with the earth and make sure, what if, for example, with the Nile River, we knew that it was going to inundate every year. So overflow its boundaries. So what did you do? You dig, if you want to plant food, we knew that um, we wanted to be able to eat all year. So, you irrigate those spaces, you create irrigation off of the now river banks, and you create ways to make sure that the water, you have access to water to the crops that you're going to be planting following that inundation. Then you also uh, collected the silt and the overflow of fish to pr- provide nutrients for that soil. So you make sure that the soil was robust enough to uh, to sustain the crops that you're going to plant. So that the idea of irrigation, that is something that we started. um, the idea of an inclined plane to move objects to that were too heavy for us. We created these logs out of from trees. We cut them, and in places like Sierra Leone, those logs were used to push things over. So that was our one of our ways of using wheels. um, Another way we used wheels was to um, uh, create water wheels, and I have pictures of that. And so hopefully I'll be in a few minutes, I'll be able to get my PowerPoint up and show you some of these pictures. um, we created water wheels. Oh, there you go, the simple machines. Give thanks. And so we have the incline plane, the pulley, the screw, the wedge, the lever, and the wheel and axle. So in the African worldview, what we did was use these machines for different things. Okay, so here's the first one where we have the wedge, the axes, the arrows, the spears. The interesting thing, Tastedi was no is literally translates the land of the bow. Africans were the first ones to develop this bow and arrow. Now, I'm not going to say that other cultures did not have a bow and arrow. Of course they did. But as far as Africans, we did have our own style of bows and arrows. And hold on just a minute. I'm going to show you what I have here. Um, I have my own bow. And so if you look, I've got my own set of bows and arrows because I did do a little bit of archery here. And so when you look at the bow and arrow, you can see that you have this aerodynamic, I mean, arrows. I'm trying to think. Oh, what is the word? Arrow design, where you have the curvature here and you have the pointed bow. And so that made it aerodynamic weapon, where you have airflow going over and above. Um, the arrow to make it so that it will penetrate the air. And so you had motion, and you had the thrust using the bow itself to propel the um the arrow forward. And so we literally had to come up with that design. We had to, like, what do we see that was able to penetrate or move through the air the way we wanted that bow or the spear that we invented to do so. And so there had to be observing birds, observing insects, observing animals in their own the animals in their environment, to understand, okay, so how do we mimic that particular uh, flight, or that particular um, uh, object, so that we could catch our food. So this is definitely one of the things that we developed, and that would be considered a wedge, also an axe. Um, and like I said, spears and arrows. All of these were things that we invented to survive our community. So here's the wheel and axle. So we know in Egypt and Ethiopia, Africans had developed They said as early as 6,000 BC, Ethiopians had developed these wheels for chariots and movement. But in everywhere in Africa did not uh, create these wheels and chariots. And so people who live in the sub-Sahara area, where you had a lot of rain, rainy seasons, it made no sense to construct roads to accommodate wheels. So the way we did wheels, if we look at the next screen, um, roll it up, scroll it up a bit, you will see that we did water wheels and we also used pottery wheels. Also going up, yeah, potter's wheels. Okay, yeah, you can continue to scroll up. Thank you, Mark. I appreciate it. The pottery wheel, the next one, 16. Yes. So see here in this picture, you'll see a Sudanese ox-driven water wheel, and so that was to dig wells. You have the wheel, you have the axle, and you also had a screw that is going downward into the soil. So that was an example of how we extracted water from well reserves or aquifers underneath the earth. And then here you also have a pottery wheel, and so that was for making clay pots and things of that nature. So that was for most of West Africa and Central Africa, wherever you had rainforest. This was our invention of our demonstration of our knowledge of wheels and axles. And so the next screen, page 18, 17, 18. Okay. So here's another one. Spears and axes and slingshots. Um, uh, these are examples of wedges again. The slingshot is more of a catapult, is or an example of a catapult, and so that was that requires what an understanding of tension, of stress, pulling on an object to propel it forward a certain distance, which is very similar to the bow and arrow. Um, you have to have an understanding of how to defy gravity. So if you don't pull that extension on the or the catapult part of that slingshot, you're not going to be able to propel this ball forward. And then you had to also develop accuracy for your shot. So there was a lot of uh, you know, reflective observation of how to improve these tools that they were inventing, and of course with the iron, even the iron of forging and melting rocks from at 3,000 degrees to create a sword or the metal part of a spear or the axe. um, this was advanced knowledge that they had, and they continued to build upon that. You also had, I'm not sure if it's in the next picture, you had the bronze statues, which we were. Oh no, that's the Egyptian catapult. Sorry, that one is interesting too. So most of the time you hear about catapults, you see that with the Romans using catapults. I'm trying to think. I know Asians did. You see a lot of this in a lot of the European lore about their, warfare. But this was an actual invention um, in ancient Egypt that they used as to fight their battles or whatever. And so when you see that, now you understand, huh? That is a large version of a slingshot. And so the next one, in the next screen, I want to talk about pulleys and levers and crane systems in the next video and the next slide. Okay, when Mark gets a chance. But in the meantime, so Africans also invented pulleys, and what I thought was cool is that you could see the details of the actual pulleys that they designed, and they use these pulleys, of course, for wells to pull water in. They also use these pulleys to lift heavy objects, and there was also a pulley system in the looms that they created, and the cranes were, could be as massive as the ones they used to construct the obelisk of Aksum, which was 137 feet, I believe, and weighed about 3 million pounds. How do you lift this object to and erect it so that it does not fall, and which also required a lot of digging of the soil. So you had to dig a significantly deep holes. I'm guessing like 20 feet, 25 feet, to make sure that this obelisk did not uh, lean over and fall or anything like that. But to imagine you're lifting something that's 3 million pounds back during this time. And our ancestors, those in Ethiopia or with the kingdom of Aksum, were able to do that. You also have obelisk, who is a Hatshepsut, also raised obelisk, and during her reign in ancient Egypt, or Kemet. And so, and these amazing um, statues were all over ancient Egypt, and the ones that are in Rome now were taken from Kemet. I think the Catholic diocese, the Roman Catholic Church, and Italy has they took their obelisk from Ethiopia, and the one, I think France has one, but several European countries they took these. I think some of them were donated, maybe under pressure. I'm not sure, but if you look at the next screen, um, Mark, when you get a chance, I want to show the pulleys. He's busy. And the looms. So when I was in Sierra Leone, I had an opportunity to watch the gentleman create a loom for weaving the cotton cloth. These the ones that I saw in Kemet, I mean in Ceylon, were about, gosh, they looked like they were at least 20 feet long. They were very long. They were like the size of a room, so maybe between 15 and 20 feet. And they had these paddles that the men pressed with their feet, which were shaped like levers. And they would operate with one side going in and out to alternating the thread colors. And then they had another loom or tool that was used to tighten the thread after the threads were placed or used to, where the thread was after they were threaded. So it was tightening the fabric. Um, it was really interesting. You had all of these pulleys that were in different locations, pulling guiding the thread, and then you had a giant pulley pulling the cloth forward or taking the cloth backwards as the weaver completed each section, a certain portion of each section. And so that whole process, I mean, it's across the continent, this weaving cloth, this weaving of fabric. um so here's an example of the looms. I mean, pulleys. These wooden statues are not statues at all. They're actually pulleys that were or that are used. And if you look in the picture to the right, you see the gentleman. He's created like a structure that kind of looks like a crane, because it's holding all of these poles in place. You can see that white fabric in front of him. That's the part. Those are the strings of the cloth that he's weaving. And then on the other side, you see how it goes over. The string goes over that wooden rod there, and his feet are doing this. Are have pulleys. He's pressing down the pulleys as the fabric is the string is coming through. And so this is a really good example of a pulleys, lever, and a crane system all working together for them to make this beautiful cloth. And if you look at the next section, you will see an example of the wooden, of the fabric, of the cotton fabric that is an example of what you would see. The fabric is beautifully woven. Sorry. Uh, yeah. Okay. So we're on 20, I think. Uh, yeah, yeah. Keep going. Keep going. Yeah. Thank you. To the next one. Yeah. Okay. So that's the loomed cloth that it's beautiful, and this is all handmade, and most of the weavers are male. So it's men that are making weaving this cloth, and you have woven cloth like this in Ghana, Sierra Leone, all over the West Coast. This is a male dominated skill, artisan. They are mastery of this cloth. And so in the next frame after that, let me see. I don't remember. Uh-oh. Okay, you have the inclined plane and screws. So we know that our ancestors were able to erect these amazing pyramids. And while they also believe that, now I think the most recent discovery is that they believe that Africans were using uh, water to elevate these blocks. Um, it would be sort of like when you go through like the Panama Canal, or where the ship comes in, and they drop the water or at one level and raise it in another level, and then the ship is able, or once the ships are at the same level, the ship goes to the next quadrant, and then the water is dropped in the one in the back, and then the water in the front quadrant rises, and they gradually move the ship from one quadrant to another, elevating or reducing the amount of water, and to make these things float. That when they came up with that idea, I was like, oh, that's very possible, because I believe that is how Africans were transporting these enormous stones. And like I said, that obelisk there, that of Axum by itself was 3 million pounds. So how did they transport this 3 million pound 137 foot piece of granite from Axum, from the quarries, the rock quarries, and up and ship it up the Nile River? So you had an understanding of buoyancy, because what in the world? How are you going to carry something that heavy up the Nile River? And so they understood how to move these incredibly huge and heavy pieces of rock from these quarries up the Nile River on these barges that were able to sustain that much weight. And then so that's the inclined plane that they would use to, and another possibility of pushing these huge rocks that would be about 1 million pounds, several tons, up these planes to set them up. And then with the screws, I have the instrument here, and those screws would be used to tighten the strings on these instruments and to adjust the sounds. And so I thought that was really interesting that you would see um, that would be the example that they would use of Africans using screws, in addition to making these water wheels. So as a teacher, if you want to present some of this information to students, what would be an example of force? You could use archery, you could use martial arts, you can use gravity, shooting basketball or playing sports. You know, what happens when, can you modify the contact on the ball through slicing the ball, through giving the ball top spin, um, hitting the ball with a certain amount of strength versus softly tapping it. um Propulsion, jet propulsion, how which would be like the propulsion would be like the catapult, um, or the using the bow to shoot the arrow. Uh, you got paper airplanes, gliders, ping pong balls, and all that kind of stuff. And then, of course, buoyancy, floating objects. Working with weights, what will float, what will not. Saturation, what happens when you put a sponge in water and bring it out of the water and it's completely saturated. Well, what wood does that? Which wood absorbs water, which would not be the one you would want to use for your boat, versus a water resistant wood, which is what our ancestors had to find, which one was light enough and porous and did not have the same porosity as maybe oak. And I think most of it was reed. They created those kind of crafts. And then, of course, magnets. We know our ancestors were already familiar with magnetite, which is the rock that they use to smelt iron. And after those, whenever you go through that level of heat, what they were really doing was learning about conduction, radiation, and convection currents. How those convection currents are the currents that move hot air and cold air around in your house. When you turn on your heat, you want it to be 78 degrees in your house. The convection currents come through your floorboard or from the ceiling, and they move the cold air. The cold air sinks and hot air rises, and it moves around until the room is the right temperature. And then you have radiation, and that's the heat you can feel coming out from a hot object. And then you have conduction, which is when you put something hot on top of something that's already hot, and the heat is transferred from the fire to the water. So our ancestors were exploring all of that. They were also exploring um, uh, their knowledge of gases. When they made those ovens, those to melt this rock, they had to have an understanding of the carbon dioxide and the carbon monoxide, poisonous gases that were coming out of that oven from the top, and they call it the mouth of God, so that stuff can be released. But at the same time, they were using oxygen to create the fire, because no oxygen, you're not going to have any fire. So it's just amazing. So with the next slide, the last slide, if you got a chance, okay, there. I just wanted to show this one so we can see the things that our ancestors are still doing on the continent. They're replanting the Sahara Desert between Ethiopia and Senegal. They have now used a knowledge of plants, planting acacia trees with some kind of tree that holds water. And so during the rainy season, these plants that can hold water will be able to sustain these acacia trees and these other plants through the dry season. And Ethiopia is also the first country to get rid of their gas cars, and they have only EV cars there. We have African countries that have satellites that are orbiting the planet now, and most of theirs, I believe, are for climate they're monitoring the climate changes and trying to make sure they can react to droughts and flooding and things of that nature, and also looking at what they can do to alleviate some of that. And then the last picture is of a young man who has created a radio TV. This TV requires no electricity to work, and it can pick up all of the stations around the world. And we're going to pray for that brother, because that made him a target for these people who want to destroy Black genius. But anyway, whenever we do these topics, we give our children an opportunity to see the ingenuity, the creativity, and the understanding of our ancestors and how they developed that. They laid the foundation for every aspect of science, and everything we have now is a building upon that framework. And with that, Ashe, African genius, Ashe, Ashe. Oh, thank you.
What a great presentation and everything, but I'm going to play an advertisement, but great presentation.
Okay. Okay. So I guess I can just close out.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
You know how people love to enjoy food and don't understand how to flavor their food or how to replicate a meal? They're interested in supplements but don't know where to begin? Well, what I do is I take the guesswork out of enjoying flavor and wellness with my flavorful spice blends so that they can create delicious meals with healing benefits. Can Do Spice was created to help cooks at any level enjoy healing through food. Every spice blend was designed to give added health benefits of natural herbs. Every blend is complete. There's no need to add any additional spice for a delicious meal. Saving you time and money while adding supplements to your meals can be both tasty and fun. My earliest memories in the kitchen began with my father, Kenny Can Do Bond, so it was fitting that I would name this line after him. I have always looked to natural remedies to supplement the body, and I found myself hiding herbs and minerals in foods for my family. That's when it hit me. Everyone needs Can Do Spice. Everyone should be having this. It's an exclusive brand for cooks at any level who want to create flavorful dishes with healing benefits that can satisfy the body and soul. Add a little spice to your life. Give Can Do Spice a try.
I'm a St. Cia student. Of course, I'm a St. Cia student. Of course, I walk into the sound of drums.
I'm a St. Cia student. Of course, I know my mother.
I'm a St. Cia student. Of course, I can play the drums.
I'm a St. Cia student. Of course, I can work with my hands.
I'm a St. Cia student.